Welcome to onlinephpclass.com Unit 6, Forms, Data In, Data Out, and Sanitizing. Many times we'll be providing questions to our users through the use of forms, and often we'll get answers back from the users, in forms of forms. Even logging onto the site uses a form many times. So we need to be able to get the data from the user, give answers back to the user, and sanitize the data so that it is safe for our site. Sanitizing, which we'll talk about in just a few slides, is very helpful because it prevents malicious code from being run on our site. Even some major sites that are out there today, I'm not going to name any particular names, but I have a friend of mine who works in security, and he's shown me some pretty interesting things about the potential vulnerability of sites, as we've talked about how to secure a site. And so when doing that, we've talked about various sites and potential ways of implementation that would prevent attackers. So we'll talk about a little bit about how I actually sanitize my data when working with PHP. And I definitely think you'll find it very helpful and very useful to have the bits of code that I provide for that section, because oftentimes I get asked how we sanitize data, and there are a few ways you can do it. In fact, there are quite a few ways you can do it. My friend, like I mentioned, who works in security, actually wrote, along with some other security folks, wrote a PHP class, as in the terms of object-oriented class, to do sanitizing, and I don't have that class anymore, and I've lost contact with him. However, I have enough of sanitizing that I still use to this day, because the class was actually, in my humble opinion, a little overkill. But this will get you by, and it does a pretty good job. In fact, I've used this stuff and asked him to check the site for vulnerabilities by providing data to text boxes, browser query strings, and the like. And he told me that it all looked secure to him. So I believe that if it looks secure to him, it's probably secure. That being said, I'm providing this purely from an educational standpoint, just like the entire course. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, so data in using HTML forms. You may be familiar with how to use an HTML form. Okay, so to create an HTML form, you begin with a form tag, and you end with a slash form tag. So in this example, here's the form tag. We've given a name to our form called demo form. The action is called do something.php, and the method is equal to get. The action is the script that will get called when the form is submitted. The method can be get or post, and is one way that I've seen it described is by using get, you'll actually get the form data in the URL of your browser, whereas using post, it'll just go directly into the header. I typically, if you want to bookmark a page and it resolves through PHP, you might want to use method equal get. Most of the time, I'll use, especially public websites, I'll use method equal post. If you do use method equal get and you're running Apache, you may want to check out the HTTP rewrite and all sorts of the mod rewrite module, so that you can actually keep like a really nice search engine friendly URL, and in my opinion, more user friendly URL as well, if you're going to use method equal get. And even if you're not, because that just helps from search engine perspective. However, that's a totally different topic. So moving forward, here are some key form elements and how to put them on your form. The first one, input type equal text, name equals sample text box, value equals blank. That is how you create a text box. You can specify all sorts of things like size and width, and all sorts of parameters that you can check out on the by searching Google. I want to say it's W3 Schools, but I'm not entirely. I'm drawing a blank. Let me see here if I can find it. Okay, I just checked, and it is W3 Schools. If you go to w3schools.com, you can also research more about the parameters in HTML. The next one, before I go over the next one, I want to mention what value is. Value in this particular case is what the text box is going to have in it when the form is loaded. When you show the form, what the text box will have in it. The value of a text box when submitted, okay, will be the value that's in the text box. So if you set the value here to something, you're essentially setting the text of the text box. We'll talk more about that when we talk about form prepopulation in another unit. The next one is input type equal checkbox, name equals sample check, value equal 1. And I put the checked parameter there. So this is how you create a checkbox, and the value is what the variable for the checkbox, the name, will be set to if the checkbox is checked. And I use the checked keyword here to have the checkbox checked when the form loads. The next one is select name equals sample combo box with a couple of option parameters listed inside of a closed select tag. And basically this is how you create a combo box. You can put selected as a keyword inside of the option tag to have that particular option selected. A lot of times what I like to do is have a blank option as the first option so that there's nothing selected in the combo box. So option value equal quote, quote, and then greater than, less than for nothing in between, and then a close option tag. Basically what's in between the option tags is what will show in the text box, and then the value is what sample combo box would be set to if you chose what's in between the option tags in the you'll see how this works. Alright, so the next one is input type equal radio, name equal group 1, value equal golf, and we're providing golf. Now we also then have the next option. So we put a break tag because we want the next radio button to show up underneath the first radio button. And it'll be radio button, the word golf, and then underneath the radio button and the word swimming. And I purposefully in this slide put the name to be group 1 and group 2. If you're doing radio buttons, the value that you set the name to be has to be the same for the group of radio buttons. So if you're giving an option to say choose your favorite sport, for example, you want the name to be the same in all of the options of the sport. So name equals sport, and then you have golf as an option, and then name equals sport, and you have swimming as an option. Okay, that is so that you only can choose one of the actual radio elements. If you want to have multiple items selected, you should use checkboxes, okay? So in this example, we have two different sets of radio buttons of one radio button element each. Now you may say, how do you access the radio buttons with PHP? And you basically do it because the radio button will essentially create an array that you can then parse through PHP. Okay, so the next one is the actual submit button. So input type equals submit, name equals submit, value equals, this is the submit button. Unless you're doing some Ajax or JavaScript of sorts, you should have a submit button. Type equals submit is a special type. It basically means that this particular button is going to submit the form. Okay, you can have type equal button, but then you have to code JavaScript around it so that it actually does something. So type equals submit means it's going to submit the form. Name equals submit is just an arbitrary name that I give the button. It's helpful if you have various submit buttons on your form. You can then determine what action the user wants to take. And value is what actually is the text on the submit button. If you don't specify value, I believe the submit button defaults to just the word submit with a capital S, though I highly encourage you to specify a value. And just like every other form element, the value would be the value of the variable of name. So if you looked in PHP, the name variable or index of the get post array, which we'll talk about in just a second, will be set to the value. So it'll be set to this as the submit button. The next one is input type equal reset, name equal reset, value equals reset button text. Reset is also another special type, and it basically clears the elements of the form. Okay. All right. So here are some more items to talk about. You can specify a tab index property in your form elements, which can be used to specify the order by which the tab key will hit that particular form field. So if you want to make your form a bit keyboard savvy, you can use a tab index property and just set it to a number, and the tab key will go through the form in increasing numerical order. Okay. The next thing is the PHP self variable. As part of the server superglobal array. So it represents the script itself, and you can use this in your action equals parameter of the form tags to be safe in the event that a file gets renamed. This is if you're actually posting or submitting the form to the page itself. If you're submitting it to another page, I like to submit mine to the form name underscore process.php, though sometimes I have to submit them to the exact same page. If I need to submit them to the same page, I'll use this as the action so that I always get the so that I always have the current name in the action statement. Make sure that you do put your open and close PHP tags around that, and you can also use the short echo format so that it's echoed. If you just do an open tag and a close tag, you will need to put an echo in there. We'll talk about that in a slightly different way when we get talking about form prepopulation. All right, so from php.net, the file name of the currently executing script relatively to the document root. For instance, server PHP self in a script at the address http example.com/test.php/foo.bar would be /test.php/foo.bar. That's an example of what would be stored in the PHP self variable. Next, we'll talk about getting data out with superglobals. So superglobals are variables, including some arrays, that PHP always has available. In php.ini, there's a setting called register globals. We talked about register globals I believe in a few different units. For the ease of learning PHP, you can turn register globals on, though in this course, we're going to keep it off since that is a standard for both security and production environments. When I learned PHP and someone was showing me some things with PHP, they had me turn register globals on, and although it made it easier at first, I regretted it down the line because it actually added some confusion with variable scoping, and it's also not the right way to do it from a security and production standpoint. Okay, so my note here is it's still easy to learn PHP register globals turned off, and it's much easier, in my opinion, to learn it the right way the first time around. So we're going to use the superglobals array. For getting data out using the superglobals array, if you set a method equal to get in your form tag, you'll use the get superglobal array to get your results. If you use method equal post, you'll use the post superglobal array. Here's what would happen if you had register globals turned on. And you want to be careful because if you're using a shared environment, register globals might be turned on. So you got to be careful from a variable scoping perspective. Okay. So with register globals on, you could just use the word in the name equal section of the tag to refer to the variable. So input type equal text, name equal demo, value equal hi. If register globals were turned on, I could access the value of hi just by using $demo. With register globals turned off, we'll use the superglobals array. So assuming we used method equal post, we access the same variable as such, $_post with an array index of demo, which is the name in the input type equal text tag. Okay. Request is a special superglobal array that contains all the variables in both post and get. I personally like to use request when retrieving form data, since if I change a form's method, I don't have to change PHP code. Just be careful, because if the site has any potential vulnerabilities to the URL itself, it's possible that someone can use the by using $_request. It's possible that they could exploit that. Your safest bet is to do method equal post and always use the post superglobal. I also put a bullet point in here which says, be aware that some browsers have a smaller available size on a GET request compared to a POST request. And I found that out the hard way. I had a GET request, method equal GET, on a form that contained a lot of variables. And the browser just cut them off. And I'm like, what is going on? And here I did some research, and I found out that some browsers truncate the size on the GET request. Some browsers don't have the same size on GET requests as they do on POST requests. So all I actually had to do is change it to POST, and it was still a small enough request that it got processed with POST. Now we'll talk about sanitizing. This is the strval function, which stands for string val. And I always use string val for any and every text value received from a form. So if it's not a number, it's text, and it goes through string val. And so here's the syntax: string val mixed var. And it basically returns the string value of the variable you provide. We'll talk about int val. So I always use int val for any and every integer value received from a form. The syntax is it returns an integer, and you can pass it a variable of type mixed, meaning of a mixed type. So it can be a string, it can be an integer, it can be an array, and that kind of thing. The optional argument is the base. If you're going to get an integer value, you can specify base. This is actually helpful not only for sanitizing, but if you just want to convert numbers to different bases. So if you want to get a binary number, you could do int val. I'm sorry, not int val. You could do $result equal int val open paren, say 3, comma 2, and close it, and you'll get the binary version of that number. You could do hex by setting the base equal to 16 and that kind of thing. So from php.net, the integer value of var on success or 0 on failure. Empty arrays and objects return 0. Non-empty arrays and objects return 1, meaning non-empty arrays and non-empty objects, okay, return 1. The maximum value that int val returns depends on the system. 32-bit systems have a maximum assigned integer range of negative that number to positive that number. Well, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So 2,147,483,648. All the way to a positive 2,147,483,647. It's a power of 2. It's basically a power of 2. So for example, in such a system, int val, that really large number, will return the number that I read out before. The maximum signed integer value for 64-bit systems is that really large number there. That is the signed integer value, okay? So strings will most likely return 0, although this depends on the leftmost character of the string. Common rules for integer casting apply. The integer casting rules are on php.net. For the most part, I mean, you probably don't need to read them, but basically, one of the ways that PHP will cast a string is if the first character of a string is an actual integer, you'll get that value back. Okay, so when doing int val, so if you did int val on something like 3 chocolate, you'll get 3. And if you did it on 3 choc 0 lit, you'll still get 3. Because it'll stop at the non-integer part. Okay, so also for sanitizing, you have float val and double val to sanitize decimal numbers using float, and to sanitize double numbers using double val. Okay. Checking for an item in an array. Here's how you do that. When we talk about checking for an item in an array, the common phrase is searching for a needle in a haystack. And PHP on php.net uses needle and haystack as their variable names, just like in this example. So the inArray function returns a boolean. You pass it a mixed needle, an array haystack, and an optional argument of bool strict. So if the third parameter strict is set to true, then the inArray function will also check the types of the needle in the haystack. So you can pass it a needle of a certain string value, searching in a haystack in an array for different string values, and that's fine. If you set bool equal to strict, it'll make sure that your needle, and if the needle's in the haystack, that the types are also the same. So if your needle is an integer, the value in the haystack also has to be an integer. If the needle is an array, the value in the array also has to be another array. Okay? So now we're actually going to get into some special sanitizing functions. I hopefully have provided them for you underneath this slideshow. If I haven't, feel free to post in the forum. I'm making the slides before the members area is actually put together completely. So I'll do everything I can to make sure that you get this code in a format where you can just use it. I did not write this function. In fact, there's only one function that I'm about to show you that I even remotely wrote, and all I did was edit out some things from function that somebody else wrote. In fact, the comments I didn't even put in here. Somebody else wrote this. I don't have the original author information, so I don't have the credit. I can't give the credit. Basically, I'm telling you that I didn't write this. I'm telling you I didn't write this because I do believe in giving credit where credit is due, and I don't know who wrote it. But I use it, and it works, and it's very powerful. This is only one part. There's a couple of slides that go with this. Okay, so this particular function, the clean input function, takes any input and sanitizes it. It strips out JavaScript, strips out HTML tags, strips out style tags, strips out multi-line comments. And the way it works is actually rather interesting. I'm not going to get too far into it, but basically you have a search array, and the array consists of these strings, and then you have output equal preg replace search. I don't remember the second value of the preg replace function, and then input. So input, if you look at the function definition, is what you're actually passing the function, and basically it calls a preg replace on each element in that array. And the elements in the array happen to be regular expressions using @, where most people would expect a slash. But since a slash is so heavily used in the actual section, then that's why they use the @. And then you have things like SI at the end, SIU, and those are for how you're doing the replace, what action you're doing. Alright, so that's clean input. Now this builds onto clean input the next one, which is the sanitize function. Sanitize function says, okay, if it's an array of what you pass sanitize, then for each element in the array, sanitize it by calling the sanitize function with each element. So if you have nested array after nested array after nested array, this will get it until it's down to a regular, variable, string or whatnot. The sanitize function then says, okay, if it's not an array, and magic quotes is turned on, I believe that means if it's turned on, then strip slashes. Otherwise, call the clean input function. Whoops. Otherwise, call the clean input function here. Okay. With the text and output the MySQL real escape string. Now, without getting into too much detail, magic quotes is kind of PHP's way of saying I'm going to just quote everything that potentially is going to go to or put a backslash in front of every quote that's going to potentially go to MySQL. And you don't always want that. In fact, that can also cause more trouble than it's worth. So that's why they do a strip slashes, because it'll take out those extra slashes. Okay. Clean input will clean, is the clean input function. So once you have the text broken down, it'll pass it to the clean input function. And then the output is the text, but with a MySQL real escape string. So it's basically saying, okay, here's the text that's getting returned. I'm going to pass it to MySQL. I want to have the right values escaped so that I can properly pass it to MySQL. And then it returns the output. The next one is sanitize light, and to be honest with you, this is the one that I slightly modified. And all I did was, if you see right here, there's, I'll call it a clean input. All I did was take that out. That's all I did. Well, actually not entirely. And I changed this recursive call to say sanitize light. And basically what this is used for is if you don't actually want to sanitize the HTML. Sometimes what I do is I'll pass like a internal message with HTML formatting. And I don't want to strip the HTML formatting out. I passed it with it in. But you have to be careful that you're not leaving that variable vulnerable. Okay. And then the next slide is basically saying how I call the sanitize and sanitize light. Say if $G underscore use light equals 1, then take the entire request array and pass it to sanitize light. Otherwise, take it and pass it to sanitize. And I put G underscore as my way of signifying that it's some sort of global. It's not a true global, but it's something that I'm going to use in an include file. And then I take how many are there? 1, 2, 3. Clean input, sanitize light, and then this if-else statement, and I take all of them and I put them in a file, and I include that file in every one of my scripts at the top using require ones. All right, and that's how I do it. What's really neat is it does take arrays, and it takes arrays recursively too. So I just have to pass it request. Then all of my gets, all of my posts, everything is sanitized. All right, the demo. So we're going to use a form, single text box, to receive a color from the user and change the background to have the color provided. And I left it a bit ambiguous on purpose. What I'm going to do is just do I'll just do a demo. All right, so what does it say? Single text box to receive a color from the user and change the background to the color provided. Okay. All right. I'm not going to sanitize it, but this is just a demo. All right, so form. It didn't say how to handle the request. Receive a color from the user and change the background to have the color provided. Okay, this is what I'll do. Form name equal color. It's called unit on functions. I should probably rename it. Color.php. Form name equal color. Method equal post. Actually, I'll do get for demo purposes. Action equals itself. Okay. Input type equal text. Name equals the color, because the form is actually named color. The color value equals blank. And what I'll do is I'll add enter a color. Okay. And we'll input type equals submit. Name equals submit. Value equals Change background color. You're going to want to keep the exercise files too for this, because this is where we're beginning to really build, and we're actually going to build on the code that we've already written. Alright, so that we'll post it. Now we got to have a way to change the background color. So, oh, I just realized I put that all in PHP tags. Was not supposed to. And I don't have HTML tags in here either. So I'll just put a body, BG color equals color. BG color. Variable called BG color. Now we have to actually handle the request. Okay. If, here we're building on if statements. If, I'm going to sanitize, I'm not going to use the sanitize functions, but I am going to sanitize string val does return a string, so here, color, bg color equals strval request the color. Okay, so I'm getting the request color, and I'm sanitizing with string val. Better yet, I'll wrap something around that. If request submit equals change background color, then do this. BG color equals request else. BG color equals white. Let's see what that does. I could put a break before that, but let's see. Blue. Weird. Didn't work. What did I do here? Name equals the color. Change background color. That is actually kind of weird. See, it did submit. Hold on. Submit equal change background color. Oh, I didn't put an equal sign here. So that's why I was like, why is it underlined? Okay, that's what it should look like. So this tells you what the requests are. So you see get the color equal red, get submit, change background color, and change the background color. Blue. Oh, there's JavaScript required if you just want to push enter. That's blue, orange. That to me doesn't look orange, but I guess it's close enough. And then you can do things like hex codes. So this will be a form of gray. I believe this is a form of red. Nope, it's another form of gray. What's the one that's red? I don't remember. Well, let's see. Red and blue makes purple, right? So all red from an RGB perspective. So red, no green, and blue. So that should be purple. That's close enough. Alright, so anyway, you can have fun with that. What's really cool, and I'll leave this from a exercise perspective, is if you type things that aren't actual colors. So if I type onlinephpclass.com, why did it turn to that color? Okay. That's what I want you to figure out as part of your exercise. You can play around with it, test anything. Let's say I type Dan. It turns black. It's kind of funny. How about Tom? Darker black. That's even more funny. How about Stephanie? Even brighter. So I typed onlinephpclass.com and it came up blue. How about Washington? Yeah, and Washington came up red-ish, red-ish. Which is kind of funny because you could actually put, if you like the color, you can actually put the word in your HTML and it'll be that color. There's a reason though why, there's a reason and I know it. However, I'm going to leave it to you as an exercise to see if you can figure out why the colors change the way they do. And if I don't happen to cover it in another slideshow, feel free to post on the forum and I can share with you why that happens if you haven't already figured it out. And if you do figure it out, feel free to post that as well. Alright, so I think we did that exercise. That demo at least. Here's the exercise. So the exercise is to do the demo with some extra things. Use a form to receive a color from the user and change the background and have the color provided. That's the demo. Type words into the color text box and experiment with how they get parsed. That I did, but what I want to add to that is for you to figure out why they're getting parsed the way they're getting parsed. Okay? Add code to check an array of colors to make sure that it's a valid color. And to do that is by checking that the color exists in the array. Okay? If the color isn't valid, notify the user while keeping the previous background color. That's pretty cool. Pretty simple to do, but it'll give you practice with some array functions as well as some control structures and the like. All right. So feel free to post on the forum and yeah, and definitely just want to thank you again for going through this course. I hope you're getting value out of it, and we'll be building pretty heavily going forward. Like I said, we'll be building off of the color picker, and so it's even more critical that you do this particular exercise because we're going to be adding to it. And to be honest with you, the lectures get a bit less detailed because the exercises contain more of the experiential piece. I cover all of the pieces in the lectures going forward, but the exercises are where you're really going to notice that you actually are learning a lot very, very quickly. And by the end of the course, you'll have a very, very strong foundation by doing the exercises with PHP. So, all right. With that, I will see you in the next unit.